Yeah, they're there. All right, renewable energy, biomass. So biomass fuel is basically any remains of plants or animals. It's organic matter that derived from the sun. So here's just a geography of biomass, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that graph in a minute. All right, so what are my types of biomass? We've got wood, garbage, alcohol fuels, gas from landfills, and crops. And when people reference biomass, they're always kind of referencing waste or garbage and plant remains in a sense, but gas, methane gas from a landfill is also considered biomass fuel, so keep that in mind. All right, so there's three ways you can convert it. The first way is converting it into electricity. So you take, and here's an example, same process. You take the wood, you burn it, add cold water, produce steam, spins the turbine, sends the electric current. And ignore that. There's two types of electricity production from biomass fuel. The first one is called direct firing, and that's where you take the biomass fuel and do exactly what I just referenced. Co-firing actually mixes the biomass fuel with fossil fuels, and then they convert it, and you have to know that process. You have to link the word co-firing to mixing with a fossil fuel. So the second main use of biomass fuels or conversion of biomass fuels is for transportation. And here you want to know that you take the biomass fuel and it's usually a crop. And mainly you want to link corn, because obviously we know that we could genetically modify corn 100,000 ways, and that was an exaggeration, but you know what I'm trying to say. And you mix it and with gas, and you form an ethanol, okay? And the ethanol is the alcohol-based form of biomass fuel used for transportation. So it's a substitute for what?
Gas.
For what? For what? Petroleum, okay? Petroleum is converted into gasoline, but don't use the word gas when you're referencing petroleum, because gas is referenced as a state. You have natural gas, you have gasoline, and you have petroleum, okay? And they're all three different words that you have to express correctly on this test. All right. Another form of biomass being used for transportation is what we reference as biodiesel. And it's basically, I think I already said this anyway, it's combining, again, the same process, but a lot of people will just convert their diesel engines into a biodiesel engine. It's like $1,000 conversion, and then you can pick up straight vegetable oil from a restaurant and power your car. It's that simple. And there's another diagram of the same process I keep going back to. Now, finally, all the alternative sources of energy we've covered have been directly linked to what? The production of what?
Electricity.
Electricity. Some transportation. What are they? Solar and biomass. The only one that's going to solve the other energy crisis, which is industrialized products, is biomass. Okay? Solar doesn't make plastic. Wind doesn't make plastic. Okay? But biomass does. So when you think of energy use in the world, remember that you had three main things: transportation, electricity production, and industry. And we haven't talked about an alternative to industry, and that's a huge thing. You did a lab on life without petroleum, and you saw how difficult it was to construct a kitchen out of non-petroleum products. Well, this is a serious topic of concern. I promise you the transportation has been well taken care of years ago. Electricity production, we got so many options, but what are we going to do about the byproducts of petroleum that we rely on? This is something that you have to think of. So they take these biomass feedstocks, the same as petroleum feedstocks, or you're thinking of mass production of biomass fuel for the industry purpose, and they're converting it. They refine it just like you do petroleum, so it's like a byproduct of biomass, and they can make things like plastics, solvents, pharmaceuticals, adhesives. So if you kind of would have done your research, you could have made your whole kitchen with biomass products in the industry, purchased from the industry. So here it shows you just uses of biomass, and you know they use it for food, use it for electricity production, but it's also used for transportation and industry. So advantages to biomass fuel. It's gonna help reduce emissions. This is a really tricky subject, okay? Because when you burn biomass fuels, you obviously are going to, well, let's stick to reduction. You're gonna reduce methane and you're gonna reduce CO2. Because fossil fuels produce more. But in the end, it is a cycle. If you take carbon, that's part of the natural cycle, and you burn it, it's gonna go back in the cycle. It's not something that you're taking from the ground and adding to Earth's natural cycle. Not to mention, you're growing crops, which are gonna reduce carbon dioxide because crops take in carbon dioxide. You also are turning landfills into self-sufficient energy-producing companies, and you're reducing the emissions of methane. Landfills reduce methane, and landfills deal with garbage. So biomass fuels will take care of both of those things. Obviously, we got to think of the economic benefit. Who can relate what I'm referencing here?
Oh, that it's recycling money too because you don't have to pay for it.
That's a great. I never even really thought about it that way. I mean, you still have to grow crops and stuff, but if you think of the garbage.
About like, yeah, the garbage.
Okay, good. What else? Economic benefit. Think big.
Like other governments,
What do you mean?
like not having to import from across the seas to
Nailed
other
it.
countries.
We're relying on petroleum from a foreign country that we're at war with. So if we decided to shift, we obviously would benefit financially because we're becoming self-sufficient in a sense. It's a big deal. Converting your whole economic, industrial, that's tough, but in the end, you gotta see it. So we import $50 billion in oil each year, and biomass could replace half of this to 25 billion. Yeah. So that's a big quote. And you're gonna add jobs, because now we're gonna have farmers, the need for farmers to grow crops. So good economic benefit. All right, and what he mentioned too, because there was this, self-recycling. So here's a chart on greenhouse emissions, and you'll see what I was referencing in terms of CO2. You're still gonna produce some, but it's like a natural cycle, and it's a significant reduction compared to petroleum and natural gas. And I mentioned this already, a lot of companies that deal with waste are uniting with, so she visited one. I didn't even know it was FPL, and I'm definitely gonna look at that up, but they're combining their plant into an electric power plant. Usually it was for themselves, but the reality is they're probably seeing the amount of energy that can be produced and flowing it out to the rest of the world. Disadvantages. There is greenhouse emissions, and some alternative energies produce none, so we got to consider that a disadvantage, as all of them. Initial cost. I mean, if you get this question wrong on the test, I don't even know what to tell you. What's the disadvantages to all renewable energy? Initial cost. Initial cost in building the plant, initial cost in every aspect of the whole process. Obviously, if we're going to grow crops for alternative energy sources, you got to think of all the problems associated with crops. And there's definitely land degradation, air problems, water problems. So any problem associated with crop and industrialize. And here's the chart from your book. I strongly encourage you to look at these charts for when you're going to prepare for this test, because it gives you a good overview of disadvantages and advantages to each type of alternative energy. And this one goes as far as breaking it down for each function or use. So in general, if we're gonna sum up all renewable energy, we're gonna say they're clean, overall, right? We're gonna improve our dependence on energy from foreign countries. We're gonna create jobs. New plants means new jobs, okay, new opportunities. Improve health, because a lot of our air pollution causes health issues. And opportunity for economic growth from rural to, let's say, urban. Good. And the majority of renewable energies increase efficiency. We kind of learned that throughout the way. So not necessarily all better than none, but the majority will, because you have to consider the whole process. And there's less energy transformations usually. You're gonna cut your electricity costs. This is an advantage. If you transform your house into solar power, you'll end up making money monthly versus spending money. So a lot of money to be made. So we're gonna think, is switching to renewable energy the answer? We're asking ourselves a question. What do you think? Huh? What?
Like, eventually you're going to have to.
You're gonna have to. It's inevitable. Okay, that's what you were saying. So it's the number one answer is don't switch, it's conserve. You always want to conserve in every way possible. So you want to make sure that even if you switch, you have great insulation. You're making the most efficient transfer so that whatever you switch to is reliable and it conserves.
Yeah.
Thanks. And you want to improve efficiency, what I just mentioned. So you want to conserve and improve efficiency. And that's just a diagram of a home that's kind of going green, and it's showing you different ways. And always the water heater is going to be a critical component because it's the most energy consuming appliance in your home. So reduce energy waste is improving efficiency because you don't want it to leak out, and improve how much work you can get from 1 unit of energy. So look at net energy efficiency. If you take uranium, this is what I was telling you before, and you look at the whole process, it's 14% efficient. Because you have to take the whole process into account, and they're not even, well, yeah, they're only considering the waste heat. They're not even considering the waste, dealing with the waste in this diagram, okay? Solar as a passive system is 90% efficient, okay? Obviously, we need electricity production and not passive, but that's an example. Here's energy inputs and outputs. And if you look at, non-renewable fossil fuels, which is red, it takes 85% you put in, and you end up with what? How much waste? That's a hard diagram. So 84% of all commercial energy from fossil fuels is wasted. That's a lot. So how do we reduce this waste? And if I tell you that the main solution to energy is not converting to alternative energy, it's conserving and improving efficiency, you know this is going to be a critical component to this unit. You want to prolong fossil fuel supplies. So team up with other things, let's say, or make it where there's less waste. Reduce oil imports. Improve the yield and improve pollution standards. That's definitely a must. So 41% is wasted of energy, if we're talking about the 84, due to the second law of thermodynamics. What does the second law say? No, let's go back. What does the first law say? Energy cannot be created or destroyed. That's the first part of the law. The second part says, in every energy transformation, it's lost as heat. So we can't even avoid that. Every time energy is transferred, you're going to lose. And that's 41% of the 84. Of course, if we limit the transformations, then there's less loss. 43% is wasted due to inefficient systems. okay? Or inefficient